Dear Diary, off the back of those good results against Liverpool and Arsenal, we go into the last two games of European football guaranteed for next season. Get in. Hopefully we can make it into the Champions League with our last games being very winnable against struggling outfits in Norwich and Watford. And hopefully with European football, we get a juicy big transfer budget. Please. I really want a top class striker. No offense guys. Until next time. Hello everyone and welcome to episode 77 of FMOE here on Shaun Does FM with Cardiff City. I hope you are doing well, and coming up today we finish our second season in the Premier League here at Cardiff with European football already locked up and with a great chance to go into one of those Champions League places as we take on Norwich, already relegated, and then Watford just outside of that relegation zone. So if you are looking forward to today's episode, which will also include the end of season review as well, then do remember to go down below, leave a thumbs up on the video, and if you haven't done so already and have been enjoying this series here on the channel, also consider hitting that subscribe button and turning that notification bell on as well. It is greatly appreciated. But we do come into today's episode still having not lost since we did make a switch to a tiki-taka style late last week. If you missed the last episode, which did include those games against Liverpool and Arsenal, I'll leave a link to it over in the top right corner. Got 4 points out of those games, which was a very, very good effort. And it does mean now we are guaranteed European football for next season after just missing out thanks to Everton winning the FA Cup last season. And hopefully being 1 point behind Man City and 2 points behind Arsenal with a game in hand, we can jump above those teams with our last couple of fixtures, as I said earlier, being very kind. First up, we take on Norwich, already relegated and not in great form. And then off the back of that, we take on Watford, who with some teams behind them having games in hand, that could also be a team who does get relegated come the end of this season. And they also are not in a great patch of form and do take on Chelsea before they take us on that final match day of the season. So a big chance for us here to get Champions League football for that first season where we do enter Europe. So that could be interesting, albeit it might actually be tougher if we enter the Champions League. Might be better suited to a competition like the Europa League or the Conference League, but we'll see how we do and where we do end up for next season. And apart from those results against Liverpool and Arsenal, the other reason we're in quite a good position to hopefully get inside that top four is the results from earlier on this match day, because we are the late kickoff. As you can see, Arsenal and Manchester City played each other, 1-1 draw. That is a very good result for us. Also, the fact that Newcastle beat Aston Villa does mean that we are now pretty safe in the Europa League for next season. They can't catch us up. So it should be Europa League or Champions League for us next season. Hopefully it will be the Champions League, albeit as I said, maybe the Europa League would not be the worst competition for a team like Cardiff. And going into today's game, a few players have recovered from those injuries that were keeping them out for those games at the end of last week. Probably most notably is the fact that Belize makes his way back from his injury, his twisted ankle, but he is still only recommended for 45 minutes each match, so it does mean that Marco Brun will keep his spot. But to be fair, he has found a little bit of goal scoring form of late, so hopefully that does continue. Also, quite a few of these players are on a heavy workload, but with these last two games of the season coming up, I think we are better suited here just to push through it, and hopefully they might have recovered by the time we play that second one in today's episode against Watford. But taking on a team already relegated, you'd like to think even away from home, especially on recent form, we can pick up all 3 points here, and we'll come back shortly and run through the team sheets and hopefully make our way inside that top four as we take on Norwich from Carrow Road. And here are the team sheets for this first game of today's episode. There are Norwich with their 4-3-3, the likes of Adam Ida up front, but hopefully this is a team, it should be a team that we can beat. Here we are, pretty similar to what we had last episode, but as I said, Belize on the bench, and also Quezada is back from his suspension. So with that in mind, should be a very winnable game this one, even though it is away from home, to hopefully get us in a Champions League qualifying spot. And 10 minutes shy of half time, we finally get a highlight in this game. So far has been a very quiet affair. In fact, this highlight might have just happened because we have just adjusted some opposition instructions, but certainly have been on the front foot in this game, but haven't hit the target enough. So hopefully that does not become an issue like it was under our past two systems after a few good games at the start. But Sully here does get in behind the Norwich defence, but then one of their players there does tidy that up well. Daman will pump that one deep. Adam Ida, as you'd somewhat expect, does win that in the air, and now Wimmer plays that one back for Sadu, the player who did tidy things up down the other end before. Now Wimmer is in a dangerous position, floats this one far post. Sargent with a header, but that's a pretty safe save there for Carl Jacob Hein. Pretty average highlight, but the way it's going might be our only one for this first half. Still 0-0. And indeed, that was the only highlight of that first half. So far, it's been a really poor game. We've been slightly better in terms of XG, but that's not saying much because we have had no shots on target, only 3 overall, so certainly need to be a bit better in that area. Norwich looking a little bit more dangerous with 2 shots on target, but to be fair, nothing overly threatening. We're going to make one change here at halftime because Sully on a 6.4. Let's see if Carlos Dominguez can spark us into life in the second half. We'll get things back underway with hopefully a few more highlights, locked up still at 0-0. And thankfully the action happens a bit sooner in the second half, nearly 10 minutes into it. It is Norwich here who are on the attack, and it is Adam Ida who will find Malero there. Decent chance for him, and it comes off the post. Thankfully we do clear that one away, so a little bit fortunate there, and the scoreline does remain 0-0. So Norwich here actually arguably looking the more dangerous team so far in this game, and now Hardy very sloppy there on the ball, just stood still. And it is Sargent there who plays this one to Pablo. Now Som forward to Sargent. He will find Adam Ida. Sweeps it home. But I do think he might have just been a straight offside, hopefully anyway. Because so far this game, we have been absolutely rubbish. This has come from nowhere considering our previous form. But thankfully, he was just a straight offside. In fact, it was Sargent who was offside. And he was indeed. I actually thought that Ida would probably be offside too. Maybe not. Maybe someone was playing him onside, but still, it has not been a good start to the second half. But thankfully, still 0-0. And up to the hour mark, we're still struggling in this one. Still locked up at 0-0, so I think it's time to change things up front because Marco Brun today on a 6.4. Alejo Veliz will come on for him with a half hour left, still 0-0. And with 10 minutes left in this one, we are still doing very little. A really poor performance here, so I think we're going to freshen things up yet again. We might move Dominguez to his more favoured side out to the right because Jovic is on a 6.6. Luca Orellano can replace him on the left wing, and hopefully we get something going here in these last 20 minutes. And very shortly off the back of that most recent substitution, now it's a corner, but it is for Norwich and a dangerous side. They looks like they're going to go far post, and it is Andrew Omar bin Madali who puts that one away. And that is a real dagger blow for us. We have not been on our best form today, and Norwich are making us pay from a set piece, and on a day where we really could have grabbed the advantage with some of those other teams in and around us dropping points, we might do exactly the same as Norwich, take a 1-0 lead with just over 15 minutes left. We'll make some substitutions off the back of that. Al Bloshy down to a red heart. Jashari can come on for him, and also Ben Hardy on a red. So Ian Hughes will come on. That's our last few substitutions, and hopefully we can at least grab an equaliser against already relegated Norwich. And we are just about to enter injury time in this game. We have gone attacking. We've tried to up the tempo a little bit at times in this one, like we did late against Arsenal at the end of last week. But it's not going to work. And our first loss under this new style does not come against a team like Liverpool or Chelsea or Man United or Arsenal. It comes against Norwich City. It is away from home, but still, that was a poor performance. It's hard to score, of course, when you have no shots on goal. So even though we did dominate possession, had more shots, and it looked like a better XG. In fact, we did get one shot on target, so I tell a lie, but still, that was just in general a really poor performance. And there, we might have blown our chance a little bit to go above some of those teams heading in to that final day of the season, albeit we'll go forward and check who plays who on that final day before we come back for that clash with Watford. But that is a poor result there, our first loss in a little while, as we suffer a 1-0 defeat away at Norwich. And we've gone forward a week and we are about to play on the final day of the season, and we are still in 5th position, exactly where we were at come the start of today's episode, and that is because the teams in and around us have continued to drop points in their matches since then. The likes of Newcastle did still have a game in hand up in 2nd. They got bumped 4-0 by Manchester United, so it does mean going to this final day of the season, we could go up to 2nd, or we could drop down to 6th. So there is still the possibility that we end up in one of all 3 of the European competitions on this final day of the season. So there is plenty to play for, as we are going to take on Watford just outside that relegation zone. And with Crystal Palace and Brentford just behind them, I do think they might be safe thanks to goal differential. But still, they have quite a bit to play for. So it's going to be interesting to see how they do approach this final day of the season. But here are the matchups, the ones that we need to keep an eye out on. Brighton, who are just behind us with a far worse goal differential, they take on Liverpool at home. You'd like to think that Liverpool should pick up a win in that game, albeit already being champions. Not much for those guys to play for. On that final day of the season, we take on Watford. As you know, going down a little bit further, Leeds United host Arsenal. You'd expect Arsenal to probably win that one, but Leeds at home could be a little bit tricky. Manchester City, probably the biggest lock of any of these teams on the final day. They take on Crystal Palace in the relegation zone. Crystal Palace do need a result, but if City don't get one, they could miss out on the Champions League next season. That could be interesting, of course, because Carlo Ancelotti is leaving off the back of this season at the Etihad. And the other team that we need to keep an eye out on is Newcastle. They travel to take on West Ham. That is actually a very tricky fixture because West Ham could still end up in a European spot if the same thing that happens to us last year doesn't this time around, and Manchester City do end up winning the FA Cup final over Manchester United. So certainly quite a bit going on here on this final day of the season. Hopefully we can do our job against Watford and then just see if one of those other results do go in our favour in one of those games involving Man City, Arsenal or Newcastle, and we might end up in the Champions League next season instead of the Europa League or the Conference League. But hopefully at home this is a game that we should be winning, albeit off the back of that first one in today's episode. Now, not quite so confident, but we'll come back shortly with the team sheets as we have the final game of the season as we take on Watford from Cardiff City Stadium. And here are the team sheets for this last game of the season. We are exactly the same as we were for that loss against Norwich. Hopefully these guys can bounce back, and here come Watford. Not in good form coming into this one, but they are also playing a 4-2-3-1. But you'd expect us at home here to at least be picking up some points, and we'll see if we can do enough to make the Champions League. And we get a much earlier highlight in this game than we did in that previous one against Norwich. It is a throw-in though to Watford, so hopefully we can actually do something shortly in this game, so we don't want to end up in a situation like in that previous game. And thankfully Jovic there does get an interception, so hopefully this first highlight might be in our favour, and Ben Hardy plays it out to his right-hand side partner. Now Hardy takes his time, plays this one back to Hayati Al-Bloshi. We'll find Quezada, and hopefully we'll spread that one out left, albeit wasn't the player I thought he would go for there. And we do lose possession, albeit thankfully Inisali does get it back for us, starts to make his way forward, plays that one back to Al-Bloshi for Inisali, who gets what looks like a very slight tug inside the box from Vanderson or Diallo. Not too sure which one now, because both of them are highlighted, but this could be a golden early chance for us to go in front from the penalty spot. And indeed that will be the case. So Facundo Farias here could put us in a good position early and maybe make some of those teams ahead of us sweat just a little bit. He made me sweat there because Gorta got a very solid hand on that, but thankfully Farias puts that one away. I think that now makes him our top goal scorer for the season with his 10th one. Definitely a big hand on that, but thankfully still goes in with help from the post, and that makes it 1-0 Cardiff nice and early. And just saw there, we were in 4th spot off the back of that goal, so we've done enough early here to get a Champions League spot, albeit Watford were on the attack, but thankfully Fran Garcia with a poor pass. And now Goodmanson will clear this one deep. Marco Blun actually flicks it on quite well for Inisali, and hopefully here we can get a quick fire double, a nice cushion goal. Farias over the top, the goalkeeper comes out for it, but he puts it into the side netting, and it remains Cardiff 1, Watford 0. And just past the half-hour mark in this game, we're just going to pause things here before I do adjust some opposition instructions. And also Goodmanson has just picked up a yellow card, which we might have to deal with at half-time. But there you can see some of the latest scores. West Ham beating Newcastle 2-0. That is why we have gone above them. And also Leeds United 2-0 up over Arsenal. So at the moment, with this 1-0 lead, we are up in third. It does look like Man City are getting the job done over Crystal Palace, and also Liverpool beating Brighton. So at the moment, we are on track for a Champions League spot. And very shortly off the back of that, checking on the other scores, we do get our next highlight in this one. Watford on the attack. We should have really got the ball back there, but somehow they do keep it. And Sully can't quite control that. Vanderson does have the ball, but hopefully we can shut them down here on their right-hand side. They find Popov. Somehow that gets through. Carl Jakob Hein. Should I have put Mixado in goal? He was on an orange injury going into this game. He had kind of recovered. Could have started if we really wanted to, but to be fair, Hein so far hasn't done too bad a job up until now. That is such a soft goal to concede. That is really poor. And could that cost us Champions League football for next season? Hopefully not, but I think that draw would not be enough for us with the way that these other games are going at the moment. But we get things back underway here, and hopefully this highlight is going to be in our favour. But unfortunately, Goodmanson, loose touch, and Watford do get a chance here to play out from the back. Delap puts some pressure there on Hayati Ertug, but thankfully he still finds Hardy, and we knock it about here down this right-hand side. As you can almost see there above my head, with that draw, we are now down to 5th position, but Sully now does have the ball on our left-hand side. He finds El Bloshy. Can he find the net again this time? Just puts it wide to still 1-1 late in the first half. And very shortly off the back of that previous highlight, we now have a free kick in a dangerous area, but Bayham can't get his head on the end of there. Now Liam Delap, a decent chance here to do something on the counter-attack, and he is trying to take us on here down this right-hand side. Plays that back to Sarr. He tries to play that forward, and Delap gets in behind our defence somewhat, but thankfully this time, Carl Jakob Hein uses his hands properly and makes a decent save, but yet again, we are looking a bit sloppy against the team you'd expect us to be doing better against. We deal with that corner for now. Goodmanson plays that one out, and Quezada will try and shut this down. Diallo will find Garcia yet again. Can we stop this ball coming into the mixer? Popov inside the box, Hardy with a tackle. Quezada heads this away, and Jovic can't do anything on the counter-attack. In terms of stats, it is an even game as Aston Villa are beating Man United, albeit don't think that matters too much for the European race involving us. But a good start with the penalty, but that goal that we conceded, Jakob Hein there with a shocker. Not too sure how he's on a 7.0 off the back of that, but certainly should be doing a lot better in this one. Goodmanson on a yellow card will take him off at halftime for Musa Niakate, and tell these guys they're not doing well enough, and hopefully we get a response here in the second half, needing a win to get into the Champions League. And 20 minutes into the second half, all the results there are still going in our favour. If we can pick up a win in this game, which we are not doing at the moment, we are going to make some changes on the left-hand side and up front with a 6.5 and a 6.4. So Carlos Dominguez can come on out left, and also Veliz for Marco Brun, who again has struggled when the pressure does come on. But hopefully with those changes, we can grab a winning goal in these last 25 minutes. And 10 minutes off the back of those previous substitutions, we are about to make another one. As you can see, Leeds and West Ham are really trying to help us out here, but we need to win this game. But we are just going to check on the condition of some of our players, and Ben Hardy down to a red heart yet again. So it'll be Ian Hughes to come on him with 15 minutes left, still needing that goal to make the Champions League. And with 10 minutes left, we get a highlight, and we are playing on the front foot here inside of the opposition half, as you would expect now that we have gone to an attacking mentality. And now we make a mistake there at the back, and Caio Jorge with a late chance tries to chip that one over Jakob Hein, but thankfully he controls that safely with his hands. But coming now into the later stages of this one with 7 minutes left, and we are still locked up here at 1-1 in Watford. You could argue have been on the front foot, and we might make our last substitution at this time as well. Jovic on a 6.9. And I think what we might do here is put Fadius out left. Ruben Colwell is a cam. He has scored a few goals late off the bench for us in recent times, so hopefully he can do the same yet again. We've got about 7 minutes left to try and get into that Champions League for next season. And we're inside injury time in this game. We still just need that one goal to make the Champions League for next season. We do have a late throw in here inside the final third. We have gone a bit more direct, tried to go attacking still, and just hoping that something works here. Also no longer working the ball into the box, so hopefully a few more long shots might mean we actually put the ball in the back of the net. But Watford here are going to frustrate us. It also might help them stay up, I suppose. So I suppose we can't complain too much about their effort in this one. But Marquinhos here is on the attack, tries to square that, but thankfully it's actually a bit of a shot. It goes well wide, but that is now 1 minute left in this one as Arsenal do grab a goal back, but unless we can grab one, they will still make the Champions League, and we will end up, I believe, in the Europa League, which, to be fair, would not be a bad competition for Cardiff. But the way that we sorted things out in yesterday's episode, or the one at the end of last week, beating Liverpool, drawing off Arsenal, we put ourselves in such a good position for these last two games, and we are bottling things just a little bit, albeit I suppose when you are a team who were predicted to finish around about 16th on the table, I think it is now, we are still well and truly overachieving. But as I said, with these last two games that we had, we certainly gave ourselves a really good chance, but not following through with it, and we are now still on the attack with 10 seconds left, but Niakate too much on that ball, and I think that might just about do it here as Gorta takes his time. He pumps this deep, the referee blows for full time, and I think we haven't quite done enough there. A 1-1 draw at home against Watford does mean two really disappointing results in today's episode. And to be fair, Watford, overall shots and shots on target, actually probably played better than us yet again. So maybe coming into the same issues that we did with the vertical tiki-taka and control possession after a few games, after switching to that tactic, we are going to get through this post-match interview and see what the table does look like. And unfortunately, despite all that help that other teams try to give us, in particular Leeds United and West Ham, as well as Liverpool, we do stay in 5th position, and it looks like Man City, Arsenal and Newcastle will join Liverpool in the Champions League for next season. We do stay above Brighton thanks to that draw, but still, that is a bit disappointing. Certainly should have got more than 1 point out of those last two games, but we are still going to be in Europe next season, but not quite the Champions League. I think it's going to be the Europa League off the back of that 1-1 draw with Watford. And indeed, back in the inbox off the back of that game, just to confirm, and in the end, we are going to end up in the Europa League next season off the back of securing a top 5 finish in the Premier League. A little bit disappointing, of course, because of the position we put ourselves in at the end of last week, but still, us in the Europa League, that could be a very suitable competition for us and might actually give us a chance at some European silverware. I saw Brentford this season have actually gone quite deep in that competition, and they were still down in a relegation fight this season like they were last season when they did win the Conference League. So it certainly gives us hope we can go quite deep in a European competition next season, but still a little bit frustrated we did not make our way into that Champions League. Get a little bit of money for our work to finish 5th. We get near enough to 31 million, but it is going to be Europa League football for us next season. And going forward a little bit off the back of that final game of the season, we do have some awards now popping into the inbox. The Players' Young Player of the Year did get awarded to Goran Jovic, 37 appearances, 6 goals and 6 assists with a 7.15 average rating. Hopefully, he might be up there for the signing of the season for that fairly cheap 5.25 million release clause that we did trigger. Also, Mixado won the Golden Glove with 20 clean sheets and 32 appearances. He certainly probably would have got it if not for that injury, but thankfully it didn't cost him too much, even though it might have cost us a spot in Europe. Of course, that poor effort from Carl Jakob on that goal that we did concede against Watford, that could have proven very costly in terms of money, but Mixado did pick up the Golden Glove, and of course with him getting that award, he did make his way into the Players' Team of the Year, albeit our only player who is in that team. But the main reason that we have come back is for the budgets for next season here at Cardiff City. As I've suggested at the end of last week, I really want a striker for next season. Our ones this season have been far too streaky. Also good to see Libby Kakache in that Team of the Year. Good work there from the Kiwi left back at Newcastle, but we should certainly have enough money for a top-class striker, £64 million, as well as a decent little rise to our wage budget, going up from around the 1 million mark to the 1.1 million a week mark. But that is a very good transfer budget for our first season in Europe. We have around about £64 million to spend. And a few days off the back of our budget being set, we do have our end of season review here for 2028-29 at Cardiff City. So I think this is where we are going to leave things for today's episode. Obviously, the board should be pretty happy with the work that we did in terms of competitions. But before then, we can have a look at what they thought about our signings from this season. Once the game eventually goes forward to that screen, obviously Goran Jovic is going to pick up the signing of the season, being the best young player in the Premier League with that 7.15 average rating. Also decent ratings for the likes of Jashari as that backup deep-lying playmaker in behind our Bloshy. Niakate actually did a decent job for us from the bench on a lot of occasions, especially once we realised he was a lot more useful in that tiki-taka style than someone like Mark McGuinness with that extra pace. Orlando Bar and Valise all did a solid job, and of course Schwattau we got as an emergency off the back of selling Gordon in January, and he did not make an appearance for the first team. In terms of transfers out, we got rid of some notable players. Probably the most well-known of those players like Marlene Jacquelis, who did a decent job for Sivaspor. Also Dujon Sterling playing quite well for Plymouth. We go down a bit further. Serhal Galasai going okay for Dijon. Didn't get much money for him, but of course he was coming towards the end of his contract. And going down a bit further, some players that we let go at the start of the season on a free Perry Ing played okay for Sheffield Wednesday. John Kamani Gordon we got 1 million for. Hasn't actually played that much for Nottingham Forest. And going down even further, and there's not really anyone else here who is worth mentioning. And also we do have some quite useful players out on loan who might be able to contribute when they do come back to the club next season, including the likes of Mikelchik. We are now going to be very strong in that right wing area off the back of that signing that we did also make on deadline day, I believe it was in January, for another right winger, albeit he doesn't actually appear on the screen, so can't keep an eye out on him. But we do definitely have a couple of good right wing options coming to the club next season. In terms of our results, obviously we did really well in the Premier League. The board just wanted us to avoid relegation, and we do end up in the Europa League for next season. Got off to a decent start. Losses to Arsenal and Aston Villa. We did try and play it with a bit of a higher tempo, I believe it was, off the back of that Aston Villa loss, and things to get back on track until we got thumped by Manchester United, and then we were just struggling to score goals. So off the back of that, we went control possession before we took on Wolves. Got on a decent run of form, but then around the end of January and in February, that tactic also went a bit stale. At the start of March, we went to our tiki-taka, and it went really, really well early doors. Then we did draw quite a few games. We were also good enough to beat the champions in Liverpool, but really finished off poorly in those last two games of the season. Otherwise, would be very happy with that tactic, albeit maybe that is the one we should stick with for next season. Hopefully, next time around, we can get inside that top four. The FA Cup, we took on Chelsea in our first game, got knocked out 3-2 away at Stamford Bridge with a rotation team. And Carabao Cup, we got through the first couple of rounds, but in the fourth one, we took on Liverpool, put up a decent fight, but got knocked out at Anfield by a scoreline of 2-1. The board fairly happy with that, but we didn't get on much of a run in those competitions, considering we did have to take on some quite big teams going forward. To the moments to remember, our biggest win was in the Carabao Moose Cup. We beat Bolton 4-0 away from home with a rotation team. Apparently the match to remember, 2-0 away at Wolves in October. Not so sure about that one. I thought that was quite a forgettable match, to be honest, but still, that is what the game thinks is the match to remember. And goal of the season, we saw at the end of last week. No reason we can't watch it again. It was the opener from Khalid Al-Bloshy at Anfield. Of course, this was the first highlight of this game, as we did take on the new champions at Anfield, and Al-Bloshy here from well outside the box just rocketed that one into that bottom left corner. Hard to argue that was not the goal of the season this year here at Cardiff City. We go forward to the finances. Some of this has actually gone down. Our broadcast revenue, corporate hospitality, and our match day commercial and retail. But the competition prize money goes up by 5 million, and I think that counters for most of those other areas, and sponsorship as well a massive increase by around about 20 million. So overall, the finance is a lot better here this season. At Cardiff City, the top shirt sellers, Mixado, Jovic, Sully, Dominguez, and Colwell, still with that 3.5-star reputation, which is a little bit surprising, but hopefully that will go up next season when we are in a European competition. Our best 11 from this past season, we've got Mixado in goal. As you would expect, I'd expect him to pick up the player of the season with that 7.22 average rating. The back four, Hardy, Vaya, McGuinness, and Goodmanson. So McGuinness was in there for most of the season until quite late, so I suppose that does make sense, even though when we did switch to that tiki-taka, he did drop out of the team off the back of suffering an injury as well. The midfield makes a lot of sense. El Bloschi and Quezada in the defensive midfield, Sully and Jovic on the wings, and Falius as the attacking midfielder in behind Marco Blun, who is still up front, which is a little bit surprising. 9 goals from a striker. We definitely need a bit more than that, because in the end, Facundo Falius was our top goal scorer this season with 10 from that attacking midfield role. Maybe need to try and find someone who plays a bit like a striker for that role next season, and that might just suit us a little bit more. As well, we go forward to the accolades. In terms of me as a manager, we did win the Premier League Manager of the Month for October, but for the players, as expected, Francisco Mixado did pick up the Player of the Season, and the Young Player of the Season did go to Jovic to go alongside that award that he did win for the Premier League. The signing of the season was Jovic, and we go down a bit further to get past some of these awards that we did see earlier as well. The top goal scorer was Falius, most assists was Jovic, the most man of the matches, Mixado with 7. He also got the highest average rating. The most man of the match awards in the season, Mixado with 7, and most league appearances by a player still set by Joe Ralls with 520 these days, retired after his contract did expire coming into the start of this season. The competition awards, as you saw before, Golden Glove, Mixado, Young Player of the Season, Jovic, and the European Golden Boy to go alongside the next gen that he won last year did go to Khalid El Bloschi. Apparently we performed well from the beginning. Our early season football was a joy to watch. Not too sure about that, but certainly got off to a decent start, and apparently it did ring true for us this season. And we go forward to the timeline. We'll see if there's anything in here which is worth catching you guys up on. And this is around about where things do start for this season. You can see that we did sign some new players in Belize and Jovic as well. He did sign for 5.25 million. As we said earlier, also invested in some potential in January. The player I was forgetting earlier, Veljko Pajovic, that is the promising right winger. Overall, just signing some good youngsters from our youth intakes, and also in that January transfer window, Mixado with the Golden Glove and Jovic with the English Players Young Player of the Year. So not much there in that Dynamic Manager timeline that is overly relevant to us as a manager for this season, and that will do it for the end of season review. While we are here, we'll go forward and see what the supporter profile looks like these days. Less core supporters, more fair weather supporters, but these days we are up to 1 million social media followers, and the supporters' influence on the board is still quite high. So next season we should look to play attacking football, make the most of set pieces, but also play that high tempo pressing football that we have been trying to do here this season. And to be fair, it did work just a little bit, and still they just want us to attempt to avoid relegation from the Premier League and also play possession football. That has probably snuck in there because this season we have tried to keep the ball a lot more than we were last year. The club vision and expectations for next season: play high tempo, defensively solid, and possession football, work within the wage budget, but also spend the original transfer budget of around about 64 million. We can definitely do that, be competitive in the Europa League, avoid relegation from the Premier League, and off the back of that, start to work towards recording a top half finish, which we have already been doing. So hopefully that is something that if we do stay here at Cardiff, we can continue to do, and going forward a bit further, some stuff which we can probably deal with off camera before we do get into the off season and transfer window in tomorrow's episode. But that will do it for today. Unfortunately, couldn't quite get over the line for a spot in the Champions League for next season because of those bad results against Watford and Norwich, but it does mean we have Europa League football for next season, and to be fair, that could be quite a good competition for us. Might be one we can actually go quite close to winning, and that does mean we have about 64 million in the transfer budget, which we're going to spend tomorrow, And the big priority is going to be to sign a first choice striker, because that was definitely our area of weakness this season. Hopefully next season we score a lot more goals. But if you did enjoy today's episode, not quite getting to that Champions League spot, then do remember to go down below, leave a thumbs up on the video, and if you haven't done so already and have been enjoying this series here on the channel, also remember to hit that subscribe button and turn that notification bell on as well. As I said, we'll come back tomorrow and work our way through the off-season transfers, and also I suppose the Manchester City job is coming up with Carlo Ancelotti retiring. We'll see if they do come after us for that one, or if another manager from a Premier League club goes to Man City. Maybe there's going to be a bit of musical chairs. So maybe we could be on the move, but we'll see what happens. Pretty happy here at Cardiff still, but I suppose we're not in the Champions League. Would a Champions League job tempt us for next season? We'll find out. So until then, thank you very much for watching. Keep on keeping on, and I'll see you then. Cheers.